The reality is, Jude Bellingham is your biggest personality, your biggest star. He's your biggest hope, period.
The major disappointment for me, having seen all the games, England not that fun.
There was a jitteriness and there was a lack of entertainment.
When you think about the barren spell that came before Steve Clarke, he has achieved a lot. What has been an enormous disappointment is how we've performed when we've reached the major tournaments.
Hello and welcome to The Game, a football podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. This is day 17 of our daily World Cup shows. And well, it wasn't always that pretty, but England move into the knockout phase of the 2026 tournament as Group L winners after a 2-0 victory against Panama. I'm Tom Clarke, and joining me today we have the senior sports writer and Sunday Times columnist Alyson and the former footballer turned journalist Gregor Robertson. Alyson, you were very impressed after Croatia. I would say bemused after Ghana. I think that's probably a fair assessment. How about now?
What was nice about the Croatia game was that you felt there was a trajectory in that match, that England were asked to express themselves, win or lose on your own terms, guys. Have faith in yourselves. Go for it. And so we saw the sort of energy and passion you get in the Premier League week in, week out. So the bubble bursts slightly in the next game, and you think, okay, well, Ghana, low block, difficult to play against. Let's go back to the message from the game against Croatia. And it actually felt like I wasn't really sure what message was being sent out. Anthony Barry at halftime said, England players were a bit too excited and a bit too thrilled to be there, a bit too wanting too much, and needed to calm it down a bit. Well, weren't they saying the opposite after the first half against Croatia? The second half against Panama was better than the first, and if that's going to be a pattern through the knockout stages, then great. England should go deep into the tournament. But I think by now, I would have liked to have seen more relationships on the pitch, more self-confidence. There was a jitteriness, and there was a lack of entertainment.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of people around the country who are in pub, beer gardens and things, Saturday night, 10 p.m, got the shirts on, ready, and then actually thinking, should we go somewhere else for a dance, maybe at half-time? I'm so pleased you mentioned Anthony Barry as well. Someone in that England camp has got a lot to answer for, because someone has clearly had a word with Anthony Barry after that first game against Croatia and went, Anthony, that's not how we do things in modern football. We do platitudes. You just fill the airtime and don't say anything interesting. And he's where's he gone? That is one of the true travesties of this tournament. Anyway, we'll get back to the game. Gregor Robertson, analysing an England 0-0 is one of your favourite things to do on this podcast. Probably the second favourite thing to do is trying to extrapolate some meaning from a 2-0 group win against a lowly team like Panama. How are you feeling?
I'm glad you framed it that way to start with, because there's not that much to extrapolate. The reality is, Jude Bellingham is your biggest personality, your biggest star, your biggest force of nature. He's your biggest hope, period. Because he is the guy who always turns up, and always in the clutch moments when you need somebody to do something, to produce a moment of quality, to produce a goal or set one up. It's him. It's almost always him. And, often Harry Kane's the guy on the end of it. But that's not new. I think we know that by now. And there were some people were kidding themselves about that before the tournament. I think they've been reminded of, how the land lies. And, Morgan Rogers got an opportunity and didn't take it. He won't be playing next week in the next game. I'm sure Declan Rice will be back if he's fit and available. And Jude Bellingham will be back in the kind of number 10 role. Beyond that, I found it really perplexing, actually, that Jarell Quansah was on the pitch. I don't know how he's playing right back, given all the kind of right backs you've had available and kind of still have available, even if they're not actually in the squad, is pretty remarkable to me. Even if they were going to kind of had this idea of playing Nico O'Reilly, going to be slightly more advanced or stepping into midfield, and Quansah, who is really a centre-half, can shuffle across. I still just think that was odd. Actually, there is quite a lot to extrapolate. Jed Spence played his way out of the team in that cameo. you could see his teammates and Tuchel and everyone kind of pulling their hair out with some of he put a pass back to Konsa when they were 2-0 up that almost kind of, just put them right in the mess. And like, it was just nonsense. And a few kind of overhit ones and things. So, yeah, I think England are, as is so often the case, a bit of a puzzle. And it'll be fascinating to see as the level of opponent kind of ratchets up, whether you're up to it. I'm not sure.
Morgan Rogers, as much as I love him because of his past clubs that he's played for earlier in his career, that was disappointing. I thought there were large parts of the game where I didn't even realise he was on the pitch, or certainly forgot he was on the pitch. Marcus Rashford was a bright point for me, at least in the first half. I think he kind of got a little bit sloppy as the game went on, but I think he still looks a better option than Anthony Gordon. I think opposition defences will be more worried about facing Marcus Rashford. He looked to be trying to do things, as the cliche goes. So I think that was at least a bright spark. But we kind of wanted a bit more from England. We wanted some goals. And I think, my kind of assessment of the performance is probably similar to my assessment of Anthony Barry at half-time. Where was the kind of swashbuckling? Why is it all gone platitudes and sideways passes and ponderous? As you both said in the first game, Gregor, I remember you saying, England are going to be fun. And then we've had a 0-0 against Ghana and we've just squeaked through with 2-0 against Panama. Like, I think that's the major disappointment for me, having seen all the games. England not that fun, and despite all the talk about the attacking talent, not that much by way of excitement in attack. We knew the defence was going to be a weak point, and so it is proving. I think that's the real shame in this one. England expected to beat Panama, and they did, but not in the manner that I think a lot of fans would have been hoping for. Gregor, I wanted to ask about that defensive point. You just said yourself, Jed Spence with an odd cameo, Jarrell Kwanzaa, we don't know how serious that injury is, but never a good sign, is it, when a player immediately signals that he's in trouble and needs to come off? And Panama got through a number of times. They could and maybe should have scored a goal in this one. Despite England never necessarily having defence as the strongest point of their team, in previous tournaments, they've looked more solid than this, haven't they?
Yes. I mean, even like what was the most perplexing part of it for me was, there were little half chances in the first half and moments in the kind of on the counter. But when you were 2-0 up and should have had all the kind of control and comfort, you began to look kind of panicked and sort of stretched and a bit of a mess. And they had, they were quite unfortunate, Panama, not to score that offside goal.
Great finish.
Yeah.
What a great finish. Yeah. I was gutted for the lad.
Remember the way Panama celebrated when they were 6-0 down when they scored against England the last time in 2018. That was their first ever goal at a World Cup. I don't think it would have been far off that. They've been far more organised, and we should say this, like a lot of the conversation, you're playing against Croatia in the first game, who are an opponent who think who would feel themselves of a similar level and sort of stature, and they've obviously achieved great things in recent years, and they've tried to play against you. Your next two opponents, that was not the case. You're trying to break down a back five, or at least for most of the game, and it was difficult, and it is difficult. So I think that's, that point has to be made. But when you see the way some other teams, some contenders, have gone about that, like look at France in particular. It's just a completely different level, and they do seem to have all that fun and that speed and that incisiveness. And England have that in flashes. And I agree with you about Rashford. He was trying to make things happen. He was quick. He kept cutting in from the right, and he put in a couple of dangerous crosses, a couple of disappointing crosses. He had that shot in the first half at the near post, that one on the outside with his left foot in the second half. He has often stepped up for England, but he's not. You don't have anywhere near the same sort of level of faith that he will do it in the clutch moments in the same way as Jude Bellingham. So that's the thing. I think I look at Jude Bellingham and you feel that certainty. You look at everyone else. Saka, if he's fit, is the next one, but he didn't do a great deal when he was on tonight. So a lot of kind of uncertainty, I would say, about even what your best team is now, which is a bit worrying, really, going into the knockout stage.
Well, that leads to your point, doesn't it, Alyson, that maybe you're supposed to, by the end of a group stage, have worked a few things out. And actually, do you agree with Gregor's point that actually we're maybe more puzzled than we were at the start?
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned that what Tuchel wants or wanted, he's decided he can't have. And so whatever instructions he's giving the players, the effect is one of inhibition rather than expression, because there are 48 teams at this World Cup, and I think over half of them, regardless of the size of nation or the caliber and cost of the individual players, you've been able to watch them and think, oh, they all know each other and they know what they're doing and they understand that they've not got any good wingers, or they understand that they have to defend deep and concentrate and just hope for the best on the occasional counter-attack, or they have faith in their absolute brilliance and ping the ball around and dazzle you. There's an identity there with a lot of the teams, even the ones that maybe are going out now. But with England, I think you could have tuned in at any point over the 3 games and seen something completely different each time. And that has almost always been England's downfall, is that you look at them and you don't first of all, you don't say, oh yes, that's an Englishness, or that's an English style of attack, or that's a very England way of defending. That's a very English way of controlling midfield. It doesn't exist as a concept, this thing of Englishness. So what we had yet again, for periods in this game against Panama, was a lot of well-known, very talented individuals who look slightly surprised to find themselves next to somebody else they've met before occasionally. There was no unifying factor. And my worry would be it looked worse against Panama than it did in the second half against Croatia.
There are always so many moments of great pleasure hosting this podcast and getting to work with some of these brilliant colleagues. But one of my favourites is recording these podcasts and seeing a Gregor Robertson wry grin spread across his face, whilst one of us, whether it's Alyson, me, Hamza, Matt Lawton, Martin Samuel, is analysing another England performance, and Gregor's just kind of staring into the abyss with a wry grin on his face.
I just always wonder when the existential moment comes, and it's come quite early already. It's about what's England's identity. Who are we? What's England's identity? And listen, I know Scotland have none of this either, but it's in a different way. We know it. You're making a valid point, but I don't know if it's worth having that discussion now.
You want to wait till England are knocked out?
Maybe. I think what Thomas Tuchel has tried to do, at least what he said he's tried to do, and he's been very clear and explicit about it, is turn England into more of a Premier League team. And what did we praise them for in the first game? Looking like a Premier League team. They failed to do that in the next couple of games. But I think part of that is about the opposition. And where he will stand or fall is when he plays against a team who want to play against them. And then can they look like a Premier League team and beat them in the way that Premier League teams often do in the Champions League? That's going to be the acid test.
If you, any listeners out there, have got answers to the big existential questions that we always pose on this podcast, do get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a sec. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from the Times and Sunday Times. I'm Tom Clarke and I'm joined by Alyson Rudd and Gregor Robertson. Now, an important announcement, listeners. Monday's show will be going live in the feed slightly later than these daily shows from this World Cup. Me, Gregor and Tony Cascarino are going to give a full preview to the knockout rounds. Of course, we will review South Africa against Canada too, and we'll hear from our reporters at tonight's Argentina and Portugal games. But we thought you'd want this England analysis now, so this show is going to be out early, and there's a little bit of a gap in the feed until Monday afternoon when that show will be out, and it'll be on YouTube too. I just wanted to warn everyone out there, don't be alarmed when you don't hear my slightly frazzled, muted northern tones recorded at 3 a.m. on your Spotify feed or on your podcast feed anywhere. The much feared meltdown has not happened. Do not worry. Not yet, anyway. Anyway, if you've got any questions for us about the knockouts that I could ask Tony or Gregor on that show, do get in touch with me. Again, that email is tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. Now, before we wrap up tonight's episode, I wanted to ask a few questions about how the knockouts are panning out. And Gregor, the boys did it. Cape Verde through to face Argentina. The big question I have is, what size shirt are you, large or extra large? Because I'm getting them in. I found a retailer that sells Cape Verde shirts. I was having a look this morning at 5 a.m. I found some. What size do you want? And do you want home or away?
Give me extra large, Tom. It's been a good summer so far.
Extra large, home or away?
Home.
We'll get matching ones. That's cute.
We could be like the Duarte brothers.
Yes, there we go.
Brilliant stuff, isn't it? Like, the scenes in the stadium afterwards were just joyous. Like, incredible story. I loved seeing Bubista as well with his cigar in the changing room and dancing away. Like, they thoroughly enjoyed it, and as well they should, because I mean they had some great chances to win it as well. There was a couple of hairy moments towards the end against Saudi Arabia, but they thoroughly deserve to be in the next round. The way that they've performed against nations like of the caliber of Spain and Uruguay is extraordinary. And then they got over the line, and there was a bit of a nervous wait, of course, but we said it the last time, they've been the story of the tournament, and that's even truer now.
Yeah, Alyson, there's some absolute crackers in the round of 32. A few I'm less convinced about, a few I'm a little bit upset about, but we won't get into that now. Just to finish with some joyous notes, although I'm worried. I'm a bit worried for your Norwegian boys. Ivory Coast, Norway, the hipster derby of the last 32. I'm a bit nervous about that. Ivory Coast have been very impressive so far.
Yes, but I'm not. Well, I am. Am I worried? It's an important game to me because in my column today, I doubled down on the Norway to win the World Cup view and said that it was actually genius that an entire team was rested. They'll be the only team going into the knockout phases who effectively played a game fewer than anyone else. That's going to be a massive advantage, especially when there's tight turnaround times. Also, it makes them a bit of an enigma because it means that if they should, face France again at the semi-final or final stage, France won't know anything about them. Whereas Norway will know everything about France.
That is true. I hear that is how modern scouting works, actually. You only base it on the last game. That's it. That's how it works.
Who's this Haaland guy?
Yeah. Who's this big bloke up top? By the way, and I keep saying this on this podcast, if anyone hasn't checked out Erling Haaland's YouTube page from this tournament, honestly, the guy is absolutely box office. There's a brilliant clip doing the rounds of a load of American women coming up to him at the place they're staying and being, "Are y'all the Norwegian soccer team?" And he's like, "No, I'm just the social media guy." And he's just the guy. I absolutely love him to bits. Alyson Rudd, I should say, listeners as well, it's very good tactically from Alyson Rudd here because she's about to head off to cover Wimbledon for the Times. So she's come in hard on Norway, doubling down, thinking that by the time she returns to this podcast, me and Gregor will have forgotten. We will not. We will not.
Well, you won't have forgotten because they'll be there, won't they?
Because they'll be in the final, of course. Silly me. Alyson, other than that brilliant hipster derby, any others that you're particularly excited about?
I'm interested to see Ecuador in action because we've seen two sides of them in this tournament, and I want to know which one will progress because there's something about their energy and their attitude that I didn't see so much in the opening games, but in the game against Germany, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a team that've got triple battery power packs. They won't give up. They play football like it's 1972. They just go for it. They're not scared of a tackle. They're not scared of swarming. It feels like real throwback, happy, energetic football, and it's entertaining and passionate. And I would love a team like that to keep going as far as it's physically possible, just to see what you can achieve by just playing with your heart and giving absolutely everything. Which brings us back to England. That was a very contained England performance, and sometimes it's hard to connect to a team when you know they're holding back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that point about Ecuador, Alyson. I must confess to being that guy. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I have watched every World Cup game so far. But when they beat Germany in that game, there's so many pundits on X and on social media going, oh, look at this Ecuador team. Oh, fantastic. Dark horses. And I was sat there shouting at the TV going, you weren't there, man. You weren't there for Curacao. You weren't there for the 0-0 against Curacao where they couldn't find a way to score. Come on, they're not that good. Anyway, we will see which Ecuador turn up against Mexico. Gregor, just obviously we'll be getting into the matches in detail with Tony Cascarino, as I say, on that special Monday preview. Any others that stand out?
Most of them, let's be honest. Netherlands, Morocco is going to be a cracker. Like Netherlands, like in spells, have looked the business. They, stuck. Brian Broby's given them a focal point in attack that they've lacked for years, and when they've kind of had Memphis Depay playing up the top and he's kind of underwhelmed a bit. Morocco in spells, again, not for a full game, have played some of the best football I've seen at the tournament. Like France-Sweden's even interesting because Sweden have got like match winners. We saw Alanga come scoring an absolute beauty in the last game. Gyökeres and Isak, they've got people who can cause France a problem. France are just like sublime at the moment. Like the best forward line you can really ever remember seeing since maybe Brazil 20 years ago with like Ronaldo, Rivaldo and Ronaldinho. So those, and then Brazil, Japan. I'm still to be convinced about Brazil, to be honest. Like they might be kind of, you've got the Carlo Ancelotti sort of vibes going on, maybe just sort of feeling their way into the tournament, doing what they have to do. But Japan have been really good as well. A really exciting team to watch. And Daisen Maeda's goal in the last game was like one of the best passages of play in the tournament. Great kind of Doan rolled inside, played a little bounce pass and then zipped it into Maeda. It was a great move, great piece of football, and they've been great to watch too. So yeah, most of them really is like some great ties in which means unfortunately we're going to lose some great teams early on.
Wait, hang on a minute, listeners. We are not finished yet. I just said goodbye, put the laptop down, taken the microphone out and walked back to my editing desk to finish editing for the night and watch a bit of DR Congo and Portugal. And up flashed the news that Steve Clarke has resigned as head coach following Scotland's exit from this World Cup. A statement from the Scottish FA released not long after Croatia's win over Ghana. That sealed Scotland's fate at this tournament. And the statement said, the emotional part of this goodbye is for my players, without whom we wouldn't have had any of the memories that we've accumulated from 2019 until now. Clarke has said in a letter to supporters, they deserve all the praise and adulation that they receive, and it was truly an honour to be called their gaffer. Thanks for having me, and good luck to my successor. So I am obviously joined by Gregor Robertson, who has also thrown the headphones back on and got his microphone back out to react to this news. Gregor, Steve Clarke has been a subject of this World Cup podcast throughout the campaign because of Scotland's struggles. But as you said to me the last time, where do they go from here? But what's your reaction to this? Quite a shock?
Yeah, it's a surprise. I mean, considering he signed a new contract and just before the World Cup, he'd been 7 years in charge. It seemed like, I was reading Michael Grant's excellent sort of analysis of Scotland's failings and where we go next earlier today, and it certainly seemed as though Clarke was up for a kind of seeing in a new sort of cycle in terms of the playing squad, because as I said the other day after the disappointment against Brazil, this is a kind of the end of an era or end of a cycle, because a lot of players are into their 30s or players who've been part of this team and this journey for a long time are at the end of that journey now, and I think a line has been drawn just now, and it seems that Steve Clarke now has probably had a change of heart and doesn't want to be the guy to see in that new sort of era, because and as I said before, there's a bit of uncertainty. I'm not entirely sure. There's not a lot of the players who are kind of high caliber players were kind of emerged as teenagers, and we don't really look and see many teenagers emerging who've got that potential in Scottish football at the moment, which is a concern. So, Michael's piece started with, here we go again then. And it was like, okay, we're going to have this analysis of where we're going wrong and developing players and actually coaches now. We've been famed for being a country that produces some of the best managers and coaches in the world throughout history, and that's no longer really the case either. So, there'll be a lot of deep introspection, I think, in the coming days, and probably Clarke's exit will even add to that. But if you're looking for an answer about who's next, I don't know, Tom. It's tough. There's not, and Scottish managers who are doing well just now. Derek McInnes would have been one of them. He's just joined Rangers, and he was at a kind of a peak with Hearts last season. Beyond that, it's tough.
Yeah, well, we won't get into too much of that. We'll maybe come back to it on Monday show. But just give me a sense of, you were just talking recently on this same very show that we just stopped recording with me and Alyson about England fans and their perspective. I mean, you're a former player and a journalist, but you are also a fan of this Scotland team, first and foremost. You talk about on this show watching with your pals and things. Will there be upset at Steve Clarke going? Will there be a lot of people actually quite pleased?
I mean, I think anyone who's sensible should be able to step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture and, have some perspective. And the fact that we've just competed in our first World Cup for 28 years. He's the guy who led us there after back-to-back Euro campaigns. And it'd been more than 20 years since we'd been at them as well. So, he has achieved a lot. I said that in the last show and I had a bit of pushback from one or two listeners who said, achieved what? When you think about the barren spell that came before Steve Clarke, he has achieved a lot. What's been an enormous disappointment is how we've performed when we've reached the major tournaments. And there's even kind of nuance to that conversation too, I think, because we did play the 5th and 6th ranked teams in the world. We Haiti turned out to be not to give everyone a decent game. And it's more about, I think, the sort of unease or the reason there won't be that much love lost among the Scottish public is just the way we approached a lot of those games. And this is kind of been the conversation we had over the last few weeks as well. Just we can understand when you approach a game conservatively, but you just want to have a bit more gumption and gallus going forward. And we never ever at any stage really of any of the three tournaments we've reached under Steve Clarke showed enough of that, and I think that's the next step. But as I said before, he can only work with the tools at his disposal, and there were some glaring holes and gaps or drop-offs in sort of level from our top-level players to like a centre-half or a centre-forward. And when you get to a World Cup, that's illuminated pretty brutally. So I still would want to say thank you to Steve Clarke, because he most of my adult life, I've not seen Scotland at a major tournament, and there was a lot of excitement going into all these major tournaments, even if ultimately the end result was always the same: major disappointment.
Yeah, well, listeners, if you've got questions maybe for Gregor on Monday's show, do get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. Gregor, thank you very much for joining me again for an extra bolt-on part of this game podcast after that breaking news that Steve Clarke is quitting as Scotland manager. Unless there's any more breaking news when I go back to my desk in 2 minutes, that will be it for today's show. Just to reiterate again, we will be back on Monday at a slightly later time because we'll be back in the studio as well and on YouTube. So we'll see you then.